There is a question we refuse to ask in Britain because it feels uncomfortable, authoritarian, or politically unfashionable. But refusing to ask the question has not solved the problem. It has only allowed it to metastasize. What do we actually want to do with offenders, not in slogans, not in soundbites, not in the abstract language of rehabilitation and restorative justice that policymakers like to use without defining, but in practical terms? Because right now the system we operate is failing on every front. It fails victims, it fails communities, it fails offenders themselves. And it fails the state, which pours billions into a justice system that does not prevent reoffending, does not instill discipline, and does not redirect lives with any consistency. The uncomfortable argument is this: certain categories of offenders should not be sent to rot in prison or cycled endlessly through probation. They should be legally required to serve. Specifically, to serve within structured national service, including the military and military-adjacent civil service. Not as punishment theatre, not as cruelty, but as a serious alternative to a broken system that currently produces hardened criminals out of disorganized young people. This is not a call for brutality, it is a call for structure. The collapse of discipline in the youth pipeline. Youth offending in the UK has been discussed for decades as though it were primarily a question of poverty, deprivation, trauma, or social exclusion. All of these factors exist, none of them are new. And yet the scale of dysfunction we now see among certain cohorts of young people is unprecedented. Schools report behaviour they are unable to manage. Teachers report intimidation. Police report teenagers who view arrest as routine. Youth workers report disengagement so severe that basic authority is treated as provocation. The system responds with referrals, panels, interventions, courses, and acronyms. Meanwhile, the underlying reality remains unchanged. Large numbers of young people grow up without structure, without routine, without discipline, without respect for authority, and without any framework that rewards responsibility. Then we act surprised when they offend. There is a reluctance in modern Britain to talk honestly about discipline. The word itself has become politically suspect. Yet discipline is the foundation of every functioning institution. Schools, universities, workplaces, hospitals, emergency services, engineering, aviation, medicine, sport, and yes, the military. Where discipline is absent, chaos emerges. That is not ideology, it is observation. The argument for mandatory youth cadet participation until the age of 18 is not about militarization of children. It is about the recognition that structured youth programs with hierarchy, responsibility, physical activity, teamwork, and accountability consistently produce better outcomes than fragmented interventions. Cadet forces already exist. They are oversubscribed. They have long waiting lists. Parents fight to get their children in because they recognize something the state seems unwilling to admit: structure works. Cadet participation correlates with improved behaviour, higher school attendance, increased confidence, and reduced offending. That is not controversial, it is documented. The radical element of the proposal is not the existence of youth cadets. It is the suggestion that participation should be compulsory rather than optional. Why should this be controversial? We already mandate education. We already mandate safeguarding. We already mandate vaccination programs in certain contexts. We already mandate attendance. We already mandate civic responsibility in various forms. We mandate what we believe is socially necessary. If we genuinely believe that discipline, routine, and civic responsibility are essential for producing stable citizens, then making structured youth service compulsory is not authoritarian. It is coherent. Prison is not working. For adult repeat offenders, the situation is even more stark. The UK prison system is overcrowded, under-resourced, and increasingly incapable of delivering either punishment or rehabilitation in any meaningful sense. Reoffending rates remain high. Many offenders leave prison with the same attitudes, fewer opportunities, and deeper alienation than when they entered. Prisons, as currently configured, often function as schools for criminal networking rather than institutions of reform. They warehouse people. They do not transform them. At enormous cost to the taxpayer. And yet the political conversation remains trapped between two unsatisfactory poles: lock them up versus be more compassionate. Neither approach addresses the deeper structural problem. We are not imposing any form of meaningful discipline that actually reshapes behaviour. Military service, by contrast, is built entirely around discipline, accountability, structure, and consequence. It is one of the few institutions left that still enforces clear standards and expectations. This is not romanticization. Military service is demanding. It is psychologically and physically rigorous. It is hierarchical. It is structured. It does not tolerate chaos. It does not reward impulsivity. That is precisely why it changes people. The proposal is not that every offender should be handed a weapon. That is a straw man argument. Modern armed forces involve vast numbers of roles that are non-combat, non-weaponized, and focused on logistics, engineering, construction, communications, healthcare, disaster response, infrastructure, and administration. Military service today is not simply trench warfare. It is one of the most complex organizational ecosystems in the country. The proposal is that certain offenders, particularly repeat violent offenders who have demonstrated persistent disregard for law and social norms, should be offered, or required, to complete structured national service instead of or alongside traditional custodial sentences. Not a free pass, not a reward, a rigorous obligation. Structure as intervention, not cruelty. Critics will inevitably frame this as punitive, authoritarian, or reminiscent of darker historical models. But that framing avoids the real question: what are we doing now that works better? At present, a young man involved in repeat violence might cycle through youth offending panels, short sentences, probation, suspended sentences, short prison stints, and early release. Each intervention is fragmented. None impose sustained structure. None remove the individual from the environment that fuels the behaviour. None demand prolonged accountability. Mandatory service would. A structured service program would mean fixed routine, early mornings, physical training, skills acquisition, clear hierarchy. Consequences for failure, reward for effort, team accountability, purposeful contribution, removal from destructive peer networks. These are precisely the ingredients absent in many repeat offenders' lives. The proposal is not rooted in punishment fantasy, it is rooted in behavioral reality. People change when their environment changes. An environment is not just geography, it is expectation. Military environments impose expectation. The question is not whether this would be easy. It would not be, that is the point. The question is whether it would be more effective than the current revolving door of courts, probation, and prisons. And it is increasingly difficult to argue that it would not. The victims are already living with coercion. A common objection to mandatory service is that it infringes on personal liberty. That is true. But incarceration also infringes on liberty. Probation infringes on liberty. Curfews infringe on liberty. Community orders infringe on liberty. The justice system already operates on the principle that certain behaviours result in loss of autonomy. The difference is that current sanctions often produce little benefit for anyone. Victims see no improvement, communities see no improvement, offenders see no improvement, the state pays enormous sums for failure. Mandatory service at least offers a pathway that might genuinely change trajectories. There is also an uncomfortable hypocrisy in the debate. Society expresses endless concern for the rights and sensitivities of offenders while giving comparatively little sustained attention to the rights of victims to live in safe communities. People living in high-crime areas are already experiencing coercion. They alter their routines. They avoid certain streets. They endure intimidation. They accept degraded public spaces. Their liberty is already constrained. The question is whose liberty we prioritize. A civic contract, not a punitive fantasy. This argument is not about turning offenders into soldiers, it is about reintroducing the idea that citizenship involves obligation, not just entitlement. Britain once understood this. National service was not viewed as fascism, it was viewed as part of the civic contract. You benefited from the state and you owed something in return. That social contract has eroded, rights discourse has expanded, responsibility discourse has shrunk. The result is a justice system that struggles to articulate what it is actually trying to achieve. Is prison supposed to punish? Is it supposed to rehabilitate? Is it supposed to deter? Is it supposed to isolate? The answer currently seems to be none of the above effectively. Mandatory structured service offers clarity. It says, you have breached the social contract and you will now be required to contribute back to society in a disciplined, structured environment. Not for a week, not for a workshop, but for a sustained period equivalent to your sentence. This reframes justice from warehousing to obligation. Youth cadets as prevention, not cure. The youth element of the proposal is equally important. Waiting until someone becomes a repeat offender is too late. Intervention must begin earlier. Mandatory participation in structured youth programs would provide early exposure to discipline, teamwork, leadership, and responsibility. It would normalize respect for authority rather than treating it as oppression. It would teach young people that their actions have consequences and that they are capable of far more than they are often told. It would also provide role models outside the immediate family environment, which is particularly crucial for children growing up in unstable homes. This is not speculative. We already see the impact of structured youth programs on individuals who choose to join them. The question is whether we are serious enough about prevention to scale what works. The real objection: cultural discomfort with authority. Much of the resistance to ideas like this is not evidence-based, it is cultural. British political culture has become deeply uncomfortable with authority, discipline, hierarchy, and enforcement. These concepts are treated as inherently suspect. But the absence of authority does not produce freedom, it produces disorder. And disorder does not harm policymakers. It harms the most vulnerable communities first. Middle-class professionals rarely live in neighbourhoods plagued by repeat violent offending. They rarely experience the consequences of policy failure directly. Their objections to stricter approaches are often theoretical. The suffering they claim to prevent is abstract. Meanwhile, communities experiencing real disorder are often calling for stronger intervention, not weaker. A policy proposal, not a provocation. This argument is not about ideology, it is about outcomes. The current system produces high reoffending rates, overcrowded prisons, disillusioned victims, unsafe communities, lost potential, escalating public cost. A system that introduced mandatory structured service could plausibly produce reduced reoffending, increased discipline, practical skill development, greater social contribution, improved long-term prospects, lower long-term costs. The policy should be debated seriously, not dismissed emotionally. Safeguards would be required, oversight would be required, clear boundaries would be required, civil liberties would need to be considered carefully. This is not a simplistic policy, it would require careful design. But dismissing it outright while continuing with a demonstrably failing system is not moral superiority. It is intellectual laziness. We must decide what we are actually trying to achieve. Every justice system reflects a society's values. Right now, Britain's justice system reflects confusion. We claim to value rehabilitation, but we do not implement environments that reliably rehabilitate. We claim to value safety, but we tolerate systems that repeatedly fail to protect communities. We claim to value young people, but we allow many to drift without structure until they offend. The proposal to require youth offenders and repeat violent offenders to complete structured national service is controversial. It should be. Serious reform is always controversial. But controversy is not a reason to avoid serious thinking. The question is not whether this idea makes people uncomfortable, the question is whether we are prepared to keep accepting a system that is clearly not working simply because alternative ideas challenge our cultural assumptions. If we are serious about reducing crime, restoring public trust, and giving offenders a genuine opportunity to change, then we must be willing to reconsider the tools we use. Not every uncomfortable idea is wrong, and not every comfortable policy is effective. Not left, not right, just real.